Genseiryu begins with Seiken Shukumine, an Okinawan born in the city of Nago in the year 1925. As a child, he was pushed by his father toward karate, first under the guidance of Anko Sadoyama, who represented an older Okinawan approach often called koryū, and later under the very private master Soko Kishimoto. From Sadoyama, the young student was made strong through austere conditioning. From Kishimoto, he was handed tightly guarded kata and methods. Accounts in the Genseiryu community name Kishimoto as the source of versions of Naihanchi, Passai and Kushanku that Shukumine would later preserve and adapt, while also emphasizing how selective Kishimoto was with students and how secretive that training was in pre-war Okinawa. War interrupted the island and the man. Shukumine served in the Imperial Navy during the Pacific conflict and survived to return to a devastated Okinawa after 1945. In the late 40s, he left the island for mainland Japan and began to show what he had been shaping. In the town of Ito, he gave a public demonstration in the year 1949. The following year, he appeared in a nationally broadcast karate exhibition for Nippon Television beside well-known teachers from other lines. By the early 50s, he was teaching at the Tachikawa base to members of the self-defense forces and at universities and corporate gyms around Tokyo. In Showa 28, which means the year 1953, he gave a name to the body of work he was presenting. He called it Genseiryū. Genseiryu is rooted in shuri, te, and tomari te, the quick-stepping, angular Okinawan boxing that later gave rise to Shorin Ryu. Shukumine fused elements of that older material with solutions he had been devising since before the war. In Genseiryu, the central idea is to act in ways the opponent does not expect, using angles, levels, and rhythm changes to strike from lines that are difficult to read. Even in its earliest public form, the style favored circling entries, sudden level drops, and attacks launched as the body rotated rather than from static stances. Contemporary descriptions from Genseiryu sources describe the style as a three-dimensional take on Okinawan karate that leans on spirals, rises and falls, and offline positioning rather than a strict straight-line march. As he taught, Shukumine put special weight on kata as laboratories for movement. In the early 50s, he created a set of three foundational forms named Ten-I, Chi-I, and Jin-I. Very quickly, he consolidated their principles into one advanced study that became the signature of Genseiryu. That kata is Sansai. The title refers to three fundamental forces of heaven, earth, and human, and the sequence binds them into a continuous flow that rises, drops, and twists through space. Genseiryū lineages agree that Sansai took shape around 1952 or 1953, and that it soon displaced the earlier trio as the more mature way to express the same ideas. Sansai is now the calling card of the style in competition and testing. Genseiryu organizations in Japan document that the version performed by the Genseiryu Karate Do International Federation is the official one used in domestic federation events and that it is accepted in mainstream karate competition frameworks as a recognized form. Shukumine also recorded his view of karate in a large Japanese language manual issued in the mid-60s under the title Shin Karate-do Kyohan. In it, he set down classical material, his own kata and technical detail. That book lists a broad curriculum that includes traditional lines like koryū Naihanchi, koryū Passai, and koryū Kusanku, along with the kata he authored such as Ten-I, Chi-I, Jin-I, and Sansai. Surviving editions and dealer descriptions show the work in circulation in the mid-60s, while Genseiryu community notes emphasize that the book speaks often of older school karate rather than branding everything under the Genseiryu label, which matches the founder's habit of drawing upon older sources while reworking them. The Genseiryu body of technique looks different even at first glance. Where many schools showcase high-chambered round kicks and straight-line combinations, Genseiryu built a family of leaning body kicks that send the leg while both hands are posted to the floor. The best known of these are ebijeri, a back kick launched from a low, crab-like arch with the face close to the ground, and manjijeri, a side arc kick delivered while the head is low and the hands support on the floor. In older texts, these are grouped as shajo-geri, the leaning body methods, and they train the practitioner to attack from places where the opponent does not expect a leg to appear. This same taste for the unorthodox produced spectacular jumping sequences, such as the famed Hakidan Tobi-Jeri demonstrations, and it threaded through handwork as well, where knife hand and back fist are used in double actions after a rotation rather than as isolated single strikes. Training patterns reinforce that shape. Alongside Kihon and Kata, Genseiryu schools work a directional practice called Kihon Jogi that includes Shiho, meaning four directions, and happo, meaning 8 directions. In these drills, a simple combination of blocks, strikes, and body shifts is repeated front, back, right, and left, and then expanded through the full compass so that turning, angling, and re-entering become automatic. The point is not to memorize a sequence for its own sake, but to teach your legs and hips to find a path that places you off the line and behind the opponent's guard as a matter of habit. This directional practice appears explicitly in Genseiryu Butokukai materials and in grading outlines published by the Japanese headquarters. If you look inside sensai, you will see these choices spelled out. The kata weaves long rising steps with drops into the floor, mixes sudden diagonal up kicks with the leaning EB back kick, and ties multiple knife hand actions to body turns so that power comes not from the arm but from rotation and fall. Hold on for a second. Thank you for watching my videos. If you enjoy what I do, you can support my project via clicking the Join Sponsor button on YouTube. That way you can get early access to my new videos before anyone else. You are also going to get access to my Daido Juku Kudo Karate courses. Now, let's get back to the video. Japanese magazine coverage of the form emphasizes exactly these points and notes that the design reflects the founder's own build and his aim for small to control large through trajectory rather than force on force. That is why the form is demanding for balance and spatial sense but rewards the athlete with a competitive shape that stands out on a crowded tatami. After more than a decade of building Genseiryu, Shukumine took one more step. In the year 1965, he announced a new Budo called Taido, in which he formalized his three-dimensional theory of motion into 5 categories named Sen, Un, Hen, Nen, and Ten. Those labels describe vertical spins, wave-like rises and drops, axis changes that fall and reorient, horizontal twists, and rolling acrobatics. The origin of those 5 classes sits inside Taido, yet it is fair to say they grew out of the same search for unexpected angles that shaped Genseiryu. Many present-day Genseiryu groups explain their movement with those terms when they teach kata and partner work, even if the codified 5 belong to Taido doctrine. Organizationally, the karate community around Shukumine forked at that point. As the founder devoted himself to Taido, some of his closest early students decided to continue the karate he had been teaching. Chief among them was Kunihiko Tosa, who had met Shukumine at Tachikawa and became his first formal student in the year 1952. Tosa created Butokukai and, for international members, the Genseiryu Karate Do International Federation in the year 1959, with headquarters first in Izumi Gakuen in Tokyo and later in Osaka and Saitama. The GKIF became the main vessel for the Tosa line, and today it coordinates dojos across Japan and abroad, publishes kata standards, and runs national championships. Tosa led the organization for decades, and in recent years leadership passed within the Tosa family according to GKIF sources. Other groups connected to Genseiryu history also persist. Seidokai in Tokyo traces its beginnings to training under senior Genseiryu figures before forming its own association. Communities such as Genwakai likewise describe themselves as evolutions from the same trunk. The Japanese language entry for Genseiryu lists Butokukai and Seidokai as current organizations, a reminder that post-war karate in Japan often branched along lines of teachers and cities rather than remaining as one monolith. Modern practice keeps the old flavor. The GKIF holds annual national tournaments in which 2 formats run side by side. One follows the broad Japanese and World Federation rule frameworks used across styles. The other is a Genseiryū rules kumite event that encourages the very tools that define the style. Under that rule set, controlled finishing techniques are rewarded, diagonal rising kicks and EB kicks are recognized, and knife hand and back fist actions are not treated as exotic exceptions. Public summaries from the headquarters describe how throws from the waist down, gripping, off-balancing, and follow-ups on a kneeling opponent are part of the scoring picture when performed with control. Video from recent nationals shows these rules in action with the expected blend of footwork, drops, and leaning kick attacks. If you want to understand the technical heart of Genseiryu in training terms, think of it as a continuous attempt to exit the opponent's line and re-enter from a blind angle. The stance work is alive rather than rooted, so that cat stance and half-facing positions appear constantly as staging points for turns and steps. The hips are trained to whip rather than shove, so double knife hand actions become compact turbines when tied to a pivot. Breath is coordinated with the rise and fall of the center rather than only with static contraction. In the striking, the style makes free use of back fist, ridge hand, and knife hand as true finishing tools after a rotation or drop, not just as decorative links between punches. In the kicking, the usual front and roundhouse are present, but the hallmark is the willingness to attack while supported by the hands or while falling, which changes both the timing and the height at which the leg appears. That is why an EB kick can hammer the body as you post, and why a diagonal up kick can lance through the guard just as your torso is leaving the line. These are not tricks but expressions of the founding idea that the opponent should never find you where he expects you to be. The kata map reflects this personality. Alongside Sansai, Genseiryū preserves older shapes and founder-specific versions. For example, Shukumine no Passai and a Kishimoto line of Kushanku, and it performs wankan, rohai, and chinto with the same bias toward turns, drops, and offline strikes. The official kata collection of the G-Kif is documented in Japanese materials and reinforced by film released by the headquarters and member dojos. The presence of Sansai in Federation rulebooks and its acceptance in competition circuits created a feedback loop in the 2010s, drawing athletes from outside the style to study the form for performance while also pointing a wider audience back to Genseiryu's curriculum. As for people, the story begins with Shukumine, passes through Sadoyama and Kishimoto, and then widens to the first generation who kept the karate line when the founder moved on to Taido. Kunihiko Tosa is the central organizer of that era, credited with systematizing the curriculum and establishing the federation in 1959. Later figures include his son Kiyohiko Tosa, a national team member under World Federation banners, and instructors who spread the art to Europe, the Americas, India, and Australia through G-Kif and related associations. The names differ by country, yet the pattern is similar everywhere. Students are pulled in by the electric silhouette of Sansai. They discover the leaning kicks and the directional drills, and they stay for a style that insists the shortest path is sometimes a curve. What is Genseiryu now? It is a living Okinawan-derived karate with a Tokyo post-war accent that continues to prize kata as a vehicle for ideas, continues to coach angular entries and level changes in Kihon and Shiho practice, and continues to celebrate its own flavor in a rule set that rewards the very strikes and kicks that make it recognizable. The line that began with a handful of students on a self-defense forces base now runs through a federation with many dojos inside Japan and a network abroad. And the form that was meant to replace 3 separate studies has become a single signature that still tells you, as soon as the first turn begins, that you are watching Genseiryu.